Facebook Live. Let's.
This
My
is
friends are cool.
I was like, wait, this is not a Facebook Live.
We could.
I'm not on Facebook anymore, so.
Oh, really? Well, good thing. So your friends won't see you. Is that how it works?
People just
It's for Friday. Why not? Try it. We're all learning new things. Maybe you'll get on Facebook after this.
No, I'm done.
No?
Yeah,
Done.
I jumped off in August, and yeah, I think it was one of the healthiest things I've done, honestly. I can't, there is no shitty comment unanswered in my world. And I was using it as a platform to just scream into the ether about everything political and cultural, and it became a lot. So, yeah.
You could wear you could always create, I don't know, like a pseudonym or some sort of like fake profile, and just, I don't know. But no, I'm drinking. What are you drinking?
I have a Blanc de Malbec. I have a nice little white wine here.
Okay.
Yeah. I've got a red as a backup in case things get wild.
Just 5 bottles under your table.
No,
do you drink a lot? Just 2?
I do. I drink wine. So.
Well, I got this.
It's a Taiwanese beer. Fruit. It's very fruity. And you can get it at 99 Ranch or H Mart.
Cool. Well, cheers.
Cheers. Sponsor me. All right. I think it's live. But yeah, so what you do something in nonprofits. What's your story? Why nonprofits?
Yeah,
You're
so
on a bunch
I
of boards too, right?
Yeah, definitely. So first of all, is my audio okay? I recorded a video earlier this week and my microphone didn't sound great. Yeah, so
we'll find out after.
We'll find out. I think it was the program that they recorded on. It's not my fault. Yeah, so I've worked in nonprofits for 15 years. It's been so I started off, I wanted to be a chef. And so I worked in hospitality I started when I was 16 working in commercial kitchens, and I did that through my early 20s. And then that burnt me out real quick. I was working 12-hour days, a second shift. I never saw my friends. My body hurt. I was like 20 years old and my knees were giving out, kind of thing. And when I was doing it, it was in like the early 2000s in Indianapolis, and there was only one restaurant that was owned by a woman. And I thought about going to culinary school. I decided not to. I just wanted to get the experience, but I knew that there wasn't going to be any way for me to advance. It was a totally masculine dominated culture, and it still is in a lot of ways, but there are a lot of women who are paving the way. I left and did a couple of odd jobs and then dropped into nonprofits, and had always been really like involved like politically and from an advocacy standpoint, and just rolled with it. I started in my mid-20s and I'm now in my late 30s, and we're going on 15 years of working in nonprofits. And yeah, so I guess I'm here because I'm still an entrepreneur, and I started a consulting company in February of 2019. So we're going on 2 years with that, where I help nonprofits with their management, basically everything up to fundraising. And like you said, I sit on boards. I just jumped off a call with a client talking about strategic planning and board development. Like, it's stuff that I could talk about all day long, basically.
So it's really interesting because like with hospitality and what your work with nonprofit is a correlation, or the similarity is you really enjoyed giving a good experience with people. So that was a huge shift. So what was it that got you into were you just suddenly like interested in helping people?
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't think I've ever been asked that question. I started cooking because when I was a kid, I used to watch my dad cook. You know what I mean? Like, he would cook in the kitchen while watching cooking shows on PBS and writing down recipes of the shows that he was watching while he was actually making dinner. And making dinner for us was his passion. Like, my mother never cooked. My stepmother never cooked. He would do all kinds of like beautiful things. And you know,
was that his like job, or is just like whenever he came home, it's like, oh, I want to cook for my family?
No, he was basically like a carpenter handyman in South Florida, and he was like, and so I don't think you know this, but like my dad was 60 when I was born, and so he was a lot older, and as I got older, he kept getting older, and so he hustled his whole he hustled basically the second half of his life, because he lived a couple of different crazy stories, which is totally different podcast. The original Hitch was a total, like, he was awesome and didn't have any limits, but he would come home and cook. And for him, it was the ultimate act of love. And I don't really have artistic tendencies. I don't paint, I don't sing, I'm not very musically inclined. But what I can do as an act of like love for people around me and an act of creativity is to cook. And so so honestly, like what really got me into it was, we're getting deep. I read Anthony Bourdain's first book, Kitchen Confidential, when I was like 15, 16 years old. And I had just started a job at a country club in Carmel, Indiana, where I was going to high school. And I was like, I read that book and I was like, this is like the ultimate intersection of the things that I want to do, which is like the creative, sophisticated, artistic, dirtbag, gutter shit that, I mean, it was perfect, right? Bourdain embodied that. Let's go make beautiful things in the world. And those can also be like in the slums and the alleys and behind the dumpster, and you can find the beauty there. It doesn't always have to be super polished. And I was like, this is it. This is the culture I want to be in. This is where it is. And I remember I was 16 years old. I was in high school, and I remember the first couple of nights after a shift, I would go outside, stand on the back loading dock by the dumpsters and the grease pits, and I would smoke a cigarette because I smoked when I was 16. and I would just stand there and be like awash with this feeling of having done something for other people that brought me so much joy. And it was the most satisfying feeling in the world.
I think something that's really interesting too is like on the topic of, creativity and creating new things. Like you're talking about Anthony Bourdain going to these disadvantaged locations with, limited resources. And, I was like, nonprofits, the nonprofits that you're working with, sometimes they don't have as much sponsorships to do all the meaningful work that they want to do. And so similarly, you're going in.
Yeah. And so that's it. And so I have not yet had the opportunity to do what Bourdain did, to go into, I've traveled the world. I've been to several third world countries, and I've also been to several very well-developed countries and have eaten very well in both of them. But what he was able to do from the standpoint of melding philanthropy with culinary, I haven't been able to do. And that's, if I really think about it, that would be like the pinnacle. However,
what is that your goal?
I don't know. I've got a couple of like, I've got a couple out there, but I think that the culinary philanthropic world right now has a lot of good people who are working in it. And so I don't necessarily feel the need to jump into it. But what I found was, so I wanted to go to culinary school. I didn't go to college right out of high school. So I spent several years traveling. I cooked, and then I worked for this nonprofit where I traveled internationally and was working with schools because I thought that was a fun thing to do. And when I finally got back to school, I actually started I got my associate's degree, and my first semester at the community college I went to was the fall of 2008. And so in September of 2008, I had to take this macroeconomics course, which was a requirement. And if you know what happened in the fall of 2008, that's when the banks failed, right? That's when the housing bubble burst. And I had this amazing professor. Her name is Vanessa Cruz. She went to MIT when she was 17 years old. She didn't give a shit if you wanted to be in her class. She was basically like, if you want to be here, sit in the front. If you don't, sit in the back, and don't disrupt me, and I'll give you an A, basically. But for those of you who are interested in this, come forward. And I was just like, tell me more. And I was super engaged and talked to her all the time. And she was like, if you want to do this, you've got to take some math classes. And I grew up thinking I was really bad at math for a number of reasons. And I took a couple of math classes, and I was like, no, I get this. Like, I 100% understand statistics, and I'm getting trigonometry, and I understand community level calculus. And she was like, cool, go for it. And so I was like, all right. So I started pursuing an economics degree, and then fast forward several years, was at UT finishing my degree. It's what brought me to Austin. I'm like in Calc 3, just like whizzing through this stuff. And I was like, holy shit, I'm good at math. That's crazy. And at the time, when I'd been working with nonprofits from a bunch of different quantitative angles, like the feel good stuff and the fundraising and the marketing and going out there and talking to people about what they did. And when I got into the finance side of nonprofits and the budgeting and the compliance and like all the math that went into that, I was like, this is it. Like, this is where I fit. And I've been doing that now for probably 12 years, honestly. So budgets and spreadsheets and forecasting and all that stuff, that's the happy spot that I live in.
So you built yourself in a sense. I'm curious though that like you have this passion for helping others. You have this acumen of understanding what's going on in the world around us and trying to figure out how you can impact. But you place yourself in a position where you're supporting nonprofits instead of creating your own.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say that's intentional for a number of different reasons. I have worked for progressively larger organizations throughout my career. And like my first job when I was in Austin was with a nonprofit called Foundation Communities, which is a really great affordable housing nonprofit. They have grown considerably. I think they've doubled in size in the number of, so they build and manage affordable housing properties, right? So single family homes, multi-family units, and then single resident occupancies, which are like basically studios for people who are coming out of homelessness. And I grew with them. And then after I graduated with my degree from UT in the spring of 2015, I moved to DC to work for World Resource Institute, which is a global environmental think tank. I didn't last long in DC. It wasn't the job or anything. It was just like I wanted to move back to Austin. So I found a comparable position with Environmental Defense Fund. And by the time I left, I was managing $20 million in grant funds, which was great, but it was so complex and siloed that I was so far removed from the mission that my feeling was basically like, if I'm going to manage this much money, I'm either like I should get paid for it like I'm working at like Wells Fargo or Goldman Sachs or something like that. Like I should get paid finance money for working with this amount of money. But what I didn't want to make that amount of money and be
You cared more about the, hey, am I directly contributing to the people
it's mission
around
over
me?
Money. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's cool because you're by working with multiple nonprofits, not only are you trying to figure out how we can all collaborate with each other.
So there's that, but it's also the fact that I want to stay connected to Austin in particular, and I want to stay connected to the mission as well. But I don't have one burning passion thing that gets me out of bed in the morning. You know what I mean? I care as much about environmental rights as I do racial justice, as I do foster kids, as I do voter rights. It's pretty much, if it falls into a progressive bucket, I'm there. And what I found is that, because I used to feel really bad about this, YJ. I used to really feel like, oh, I don't have
I think I feel bad about it right now.
No, but I was like, I don't have that one thing. Like, I don't have that bullhorn. I'm going to stand on the side of a corner and tell everybody that they've got to deal with this kind of issue. Until I realized, I went through a couple of different leadership accelerators, and I was like, oh, but what I do is transferable to every single one of these things. And while there always has to be somebody with a bullhorn, there also has to be somebody with a budget and a spreadsheet to make sure that you can buy the batteries for the bullhorn, and that you can, because regardless of what level of advocacy or grassroots or nonprofit you're at, you still have to make money. And what I really want to do is normalize this thought that nonprofits have to make money. They should be run like businesses. They should be funded like businesses. The history of funding nonprofits is inherently inequitable and racist, and we need to dismantle that. But nonprofits need to make money. And this thought that you can't have business acumen going into a nonprofit is ridiculous. And I don't know if I can cuss on this, but like, it's just absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. So there's this whole through line of, I've got this set of skills that I can bring to any organization, to any board that I sit on, to any organization that I help. And I can further these missions, which it's like spokes on this wheel, right? Of like human rights. There's all these things that feed into a good quality of life. Why not be able to help them all with a blanket level of skills?
Is it a hard sell? It seems like it's easy, like to tell people, hey, we need to generate more money so that you can continue to run your nonprofit or hire more people.
I think it
So
depends. I
yeah.
don't know if it's a hard sell. I think the quick answer to that is no, right? Because the people who are passionate about the nonprofits that they work for, or that they founded, or that they are ED of, or they sit on the board of, they're there because they believe in that mission and they want to progress that mission through programs or through fundraising or something like that. Most people I know who work in nonprofits or who are involved at that level of a nonprofit are terrified of budgets, right? They're terrified of evaluations. They're terrified of quantifying things. They don't understand data. They don't have the infrastructure set up within their organization to do the business side of it. And so for me to come in and be like, I know nonprofits and I know numbers, pay me. They're like, sure, here you go. Here's what we can. So I don't think at this point in 2021, I don't think it's a hard sell to get people on board with knowing the business side of nonprofits. I will say that 15 years ago, when I worked for nonprofits in South Florida that were basically placing like senior citizen volunteers with food banks, they were terrified of it. They were terrified of fundraising. They didn't want to do, they didn't want to talk about money. They didn't want things to be run like a business. It was very like, let's just let people come in when they want to. And
Kumbaya. Let's just
yeah, exactly.
do good work.
And I got a
Let's
lot of
get broke
pushback.
while we're at it.
Yeah, I got a lot of pushback and really upset a lot of people when I tried to be fairly hardline about how things need to run. And I don't know if that was just like a point in time situation, but I do think that I've seen nonprofits evolve
Yeah.
over the last many years to start to, if not embrace, then at least accept that this is a thing that needs to happen in their world.
Is the nonprofit ecosystem in Austin, in your experience, since it seems like you traveled to other places before, different, or do you think that the way in which people approach nonprofits has just changed overall?
Both. So Austin has the highest number of nonprofits per capita than any other city in America. The last point in time survey that they did was done by Mission Capital back in 2015. And it found that, I'm going to get the numbers wrong right now, but I think something like
It's okay.
80, don't fact check me, but 80% of the nonprofits that were registered in Austin were operating at less than $100,000 a year, which people think, oh, 100K a year, that's a lot, but it's not, right? Think about if you have 2 full-time staff, how much are you paying them to then have money left over for programs if you're only making 100K a year? And so this feeds into this idea that nonprofits are low paying, that people should only be showing up because they believe in the mission and not because they actually want to turn a profit in their real life. So there are a couple of things that are baked into that. First of all, Austin is a very philanthropic city. I think for a number of reasons. I think people move here because they inherently have liberal tendencies. If you're going to move to Texas and you're a conservative, then why the fuck would you move to Austin, honestly? But if you're like people in Austin, whether it's performative or not, that's a totally different debate. People in Austin move here because they believe themselves to be liberal and they want to be impactful in the community. So there's that aspect of it. So Austin is a much more philanthropic city than any other place I've ever lived. I do know that there are lots of other, like nonprofits and NGOs are prolific worldwide. So I won't say that we're different, but pretty much you throw a rock and you hit somebody in Austin who has a nonprofit, sits on a board, or works with a nonprofit. And the second part of your question was what?
Do you feel like the way in which people manage nonprofits changed over time?
Yes. So the answer to that question also is yes. And I'm gonna say something I think a little bit controversial, right? Nonprofits are born out of racist systems in America, right? So nonprofits exist, and I say this all the time, where government can't do and for-profits won't do. And they're there to serve communities that are typically underserved, impoverished, and cut out from having a seat at the table. And the reason that these communities, which are predominantly Black and Hispanic and Indigenous and Asian, right? Like these are people who are American minorities. They are cut out from those resources because of systemic withholdings of wealth, resources, real estate, banking, education, hiring opportunities, you name it, right? So these communities have been, the circumstances in which these communities live have been created from systemic inequalities. The funding mechanism to give nonprofits money to go into these nonprofits is also inequitable. It's typically white established families in America with these private foundations, or people who have like created wealth in the last couple of decades or century or whatever, right? The people who've created this wealth had access to this wealth because these people didn't. So we're thinking about things like where freed slaves were not given access to banking. They were not given the opportunity to buy real estate. They were not given the opportunity to build businesses. So they were inherently denied the ability to build the wealth that early white American immigrants were able to build, right? So the wealth that these families have, then a small portion of it, right? Because foundations don't have to give away all of their money. They only have to give away a small percentage of their money, goes back into just providing basic services for these communities. There's no wealth building mechanism. So that's where nonprofits exist. So going back to your earlier question, nonprofits have always been based in this like white saviorism idea. Like we'll go, like I don't need the money. I'm just philanthropic. Like I'm going to wear my pearls and my beautiful boucle suit, and I'm going to go and do my thing over here and like work at a soup kitchen for one Thanksgiving every year and then not have to deal with it. What has happened is that people are getting seats at the table. People are recognizing that the administrative structure of nonprofits, including their boards, need to look like what the communities they serve look like. And they're moving in that direction, albeit slowly, but it's still a move. And there's also this novel idea that instead of just going into a community and creating a program to serve people, you actually ask them what they need, which sounds completely ridiculous to us, because it's like, yeah, like why wouldn't you ask people what they need? But this is not something
It's like trying to create a startup without talking to customers.
Exactly. Like there's no market research whatsoever needed to start a nonprofit. Like you just say, oh, I'm going to feed poor kids. And people are like, here's money. Why are the kids poor? Why are they hungry? What are their parents doing? Where do they live? There's a million questions that surround things that affect equality.
Let's just buy them shoes. They'll help them.
Yeah. Why don't the kids need shoes? Well, because there's a million reasons why. So I remember, God, 15 years ago when I was living in South Florida, I was working for I was doing like a nonprofit kind of advocacy accelerator. And there was this book that came out that was talking about this thing called ABCD, which is asset-based community development. And it was like, go into a community and assess what they're already doing and then build off of it. And all of the white people were like, that's a really good idea. And all the people in that community were like, we've been
what have
here
you been
the
doing this whole time?
Like we've been doing this work. We just don't have access to the same resources that you do. So let us have access to the resources and we can do this. Yes, I think that especially in the last 15 years, the way that nonprofits approach creating programming and management has changed, and funding has also changed too. So it used to be you write a really nice flowery report about all the people that are better because your nonprofit exists, and they have definitely shifted to a lot more quantifiable data. So you need to have your metrics, you need to have your deliverables, your KPIs, your budget, your forecast, all of that stuff. And if you don't hit it, then you need to be ready to explain why you didn't. And there are a number of reasons why you can't change human behavior, right? And so you have to be careful with the data points that you're willing to marry yourself, to commit yourself to. But yeah, and I think that a lot of nonprofits still struggle with this idea that they need to be accountable for their money and their data, and they can't just be like, oh, we're giving out gift baskets to kids in need, when
it's really interesting because, to your point, because one thing I started learning recently is like, one, how important it is to build a team. Like the way the investors look at businesses, they place a large percentage of that in who's on your team, what talents they have. And even for myself, I realized I don't think I'll ever start it. And something that one of my friends, Jonas, recently shared to me, I don't think I'll ever start a business, by myself ever again. I think it's way too inefficient. Like I'm not good personally at selling myself, but I love creating things. And when I think about your journey, it's like you have these people that are super passionate about making an impact. And those people maybe spend their whole time being in a community, talking with people about what they want, or they should be talking to people what they want. That's basic, customer validation.
Yeah.
But it's maybe they don't know the business side of things. Maybe they don't know that, hey, you can afford a lifestyle if you manage this nonprofit. If you hire the right people to help you analyze the metrics so you can focus on giving back and make sure that you don't go broke and lose your house for it so that you can continue to do work.
And that brings up a really interesting point, right? Where so nonprofits are for the most part 100% dependent on people giving them money based on what they think their value is, which I understand is pretty much the same thing with VC and funding and stuff like that, but it happens at a very different scale. So nonprofits are accountable on a much tighter timeline than like general, I think, VC funding, right? It's like you get 12 months, here's $50,000, you have to hire a new position and you have to show us this new innovative program. Think, first of all, what's $50,000 going to buy you when you're talking about a full-time employee? I mean, with benefits, right, like what it's going to cost you, you're paying somebody that's what, like $45,000 a year as a salary in Austin? Come on. That we should not be relying on the people who provide some of the most important and basic human services in our community to be living essentially just 2 ticks above poverty level, where if they lose this funding, these people automatically join the level of the clients that they're seeking.
Yeah.
We should be seeking to build wealth within these communities and with our funding. So that's something that really chaps my ass when we talk about nonprofit fundraising and that kind of thing. But yeah, sorry.
Do you have advice for, because the same friend, I think he's also looking to, start his own nonprofit. He's doing something for giving kids in disadvantaged locations an opportunity to give them role models that they can look up to.
Don't give them role models, give them jobs, right? Give them the education, give them it's not, yes, of course, seeing somebody succeed who looks like you when the other people who look like you are not given the opportunity to, and they're basically like, they're not even that they're not given the opportunity to, they are prevented from succeeding. Kids from communities that are, quote, disadvantaged they are not inherently disadvantaged individuals. They're just as qualified and just as smart and just as talented as any other kid. It's simply an access to resources. So we need to do away with this idea of building yourself up from your bootstraps. And MLK Day was on Monday. And one of my favorite quotes of MLK, and I'm going to really butcher it basically, is that it's disingenuous to tell someone who has no boots that he must pull himself up from his bootstraps. And so to tell a community that has been denied access to wealth through racist, unjust systems that all they need is wealth in order to succeed is cruel. It's cruel. And so role models, mentors, books, socks, shoes, whatever, those are very basic things. But the real thing that needs to happen in order for us to be able to do away with these kind of silos of wealth is simply deconstructing the walls in between them. And those walls are access to education, access to real estate, access to lending, access to hiring opportunities. If those things go away, boom, we're done. And there will still be nonprofits because we need environmental and education. And there's always going to be some kind of like thing that needs saving in the world. But if we're really talking about impoverished communities and what they don't need a handout. They need for you to just tear down the walls.
Give them opportunities to work and build new skills.
Hire them. Hire Black people, hire Latino people, hire Indigenous people, right? Hire them, pay them, give them money for what they're worth. That's the
If we can commercialize kids, that's one of my favorite
I mean,
no, I told myself
we're not talking child labor here.
Well, no, I was like, hey, this guy's helping kids out, and then you're like, let's give them jobs. Like,
every time you talk about commercializing kids, I think about that scene. In Indiana Jones, and it's not Raiders of the Lost Ark. I think it's Temple of Doom with all the kids in the mine. And Short Round is there, like trying to hammer out his shackles.
After the last episode with Anthony, sorry, Anthony, I brought up your kids like 7 times because I was so inspired by you, but I told like my manager at whatever corporation I work, like I need to tone it down a little bit, but I still can't. Like I still keep bringing it up. But I want to ask you on like, what are some things that you see nonprofits don't do super well on? And now I guess I'll add on an additional question. I think one of the things that you reference is, hey, first, if you're trying to create a nonprofit, talk with a community, understand who the influencers, the key players, basic market validation, customer research.
Yeah.
Also, see if people are willing to support this initiative.
Yeah, I think that the number one thing to ask yourself when you want to start a nonprofit is, are you willing to go to the ends of the earth to advocate for this? Right? Because people who start nonprofits, if this is your passion, if this is something that you feel very strongly about, you're going to be your biggest cheerleader, right? Like, you can hire people to do it for you and you can sell them on this idea and they'll do it for a paycheck or they'll do it because they feel strongly. But no one is going to have a better story than you as the founder, as the executive director, going to people and saying, this is why I have dedicated my life to doing this. And my livelihood depends on whether or not we are able to continue to serve these people. Like that, you've really got to integrate this thought that like your livelihood is directly connected to the clients that you serve or the cause that you are serving.
I'm assuming you met people who probably didn't realize the intensity it is to essentially you're getting incorporated and running a business and trying to see funding. That gave up.
Yeah, people give up all the time. I don't know anyone in particular who has walked away from that kind of thing.
Definitely takes like you're going into something in which hopefully you're really passionate about, and hopefully you're not just doing this to, no taxes.
Income tax, whatever you get from a nonprofit, but you're not paying taxes on the, one doesn't pay taxes on the donations that they do and that kind of thing, or it actually reduces your tax liability. What comes to mind when you ask that question is that there's a shitload of fraud that happens in nonprofits. There is a ton of fraud that happens. And it happens when you have a board that is disengaged, when the power of the nonprofit is centralized within a quote executive committee. So it would be like a committee of the board president, the ED, maybe the CEO or something like that. And a board is not willing to dig deep or challenge, or they're inexperienced, or they just don't know what to look at. Several years ago, I'd say probably 10 years ago, there was a pretty predominant nonprofit in Austin whose CEO defrauded them of
Give names.
At this point, it's been so long that I forget the name of the organization.
Okay,
I think if I went back through past texts, I would be able to find it. But effectively, the CFO was the only one who did the books. Nobody looked at it. The board didn't approve them. And she kept all of the sorry, my dog's gonna bark. She kept all of the files on a thumb drive. She didn't have them like on her actual computer. She kept them on herself. And it turned out that she had defrauded this organization of, I want to say something like $500,000. And these were government funds and these were private funds. Hang on just one second. I'm gonna mute myself.
That's fine. Like, shut up.
Yeah, my Indy shut up is basically like it's the common refrain in this house. But that level of negligence on the part of the founder and the board, first of all, is amoral, right? Because this is an organization that's supposed to be helping people at their most vulnerable. So first of all, what she did was completely amoral. But then the board's inability and unwillingness and complicity in turning a blind eye is ridiculous. And what it did was completely change the game for government funding with Austin nonprofits. And this is not anything that's new. I was at a networking event a couple months ago, excuse me, talking to a guy who was an auditor for nonprofits and was fixing the books for, not fixing the books, but was correcting the books for an organization that had basically the same thing happen. And it was simply that the board didn't know what they were doing. Yeah, fraud is rampant in nonprofits because it preys on the thought that people are there because they want to do something good for the world, but don't necessarily have the skill set to understand the sophistication of what they're doing.
You should start like a certification or create your own fund where you can distribute it to.
Oh no, my goal for this year is to start a Hitchingham Group Foundation and to serve as a fiscal sponsor for nonprofits. So that's in the works.
When's it gonna happen?
Probably the third or fourth quarter of this year. It's a little expensive to start this up. So
Yeah.
putting together I've got a couple of other things that require some capital before that happens.
Okay. So if anyone watching this has tons of money.
Yeah. And no, yes, obviously, like, fund the foundation. Being a fiscal sponsor is a really cool
Yeah.
thing for nonprofits, because it means that they don't have to do all of the IRS paperwork, which can be really complicated. And effectively, I would serve as a fiscal sponsor serves as a bank account for nonprofits. They have the umbrella of the 501c3, the tax exempt standing. So they would file for grants under the fiscal sponsorship name without having to do all of that initial startup paperwork. So they can basically hit the ground running, because the IRS takes 6 to 9 months to do this sponsorship anyway, and then provide them all the resources that they need. Because fiscal sponsors will happily take your money and not tell you what you have to do with it, right? So they'll not give you resources on the operations side, the financial management side, the reporting side, the board development side. They're just like, we'll take 10% of all of the grants that you write, just so that you don't have to do the IRS filing. But, what I want to do, people who take advantage of nonprofits are assholes, like, plain and simple. And if you're not giving nonprofits the opportunity to grow and to create opportunities for people, and nonprofits also do more than just help people. We can work on environmental issues and voter registration issues and all kinds of things that don't necessarily impact someone's ability to eat. But if you're taking away from just the general elevation of quality of life in the world, then fuck you. Like, seriously, that's it.
You mentioned something like, so there's various things or causes that people can support. And I know you reference like you enjoy a lot of things. And it's really interesting because like for you, it's like I'm so undecided, or maybe it's not necessarily like undecided, but there's a lot of things in the nonprofit realm that you like supporting, or people that are doing great things. Myself, in terms of business, I don't know what industry I enjoy. I just like learning about different things. Is there a particular type of nonprofit that you find yourself more attached to than others, or it might be just the people that are running it?
It runs the gamut for me. I sit on the board of Austin Young Chamber, and I'm the director emeritus for New Leaders Council, which is a progressive millennial leadership institute. And I think that those are two really good professional development organizations in Austin that are so New Leaders Council is close to my heart because I'm clearly progressive in my politics. And if you are somebody who wants to understand how to really hone your leadership skills and widen your network, especially if you're a progressive and you're a millennial, but that can be pretty much anybody under 40 at this point. Yeah, New Leaders Council is incredibly valuable because the high caliber of people who go there because of the aspirations that they have and the goals that they have and the network that they bring. It's great. That's great as like kind of a point in time springboard into the rest of my career. It definitely helped me become the leader that I always knew that I could be, and I'm happy to be becoming. Austin Young Chamber, I love because it's a growing organization, and the ability to come in and help shape and add to the voice of the young professional in Austin is a huge thing, right? Like there are lots of chambers. There's the Black chamber, there's the LGBT chamber, there's the Asian chamber, there's the Hispanic chamber. There are lots of chambers that are specific to demographics, which is fantastic. And AYC sits in this like sweet spot of, we are all of you and we are also young professionals. And historically, it's been a little bit of like a party chamber, not a party chamber, but it's basically been galas and fundraisers and things like that. But over the past couple of years, we've built up the Economic Development Committee. I've been chair for the last 2 years. We have an advocacy subcommittee that we're building. We're really starting to harness this apex that we sit in and take the voice of the members and be able to advocate for what it is that we're looking for, which is economic development. It's having a seat at the table at city council, at legislative sessions. It's really looking at the people who moved to Austin. Who I was talking to somebody today who said that the average age, oh, I was talking to my stepdad. The average age in America is like 38, and the average age of the national senators are like 68 or something like that. So there's a massive gap. And I don't know the Texas statistics, but I would not be surprised if they're similar. Austin's probably younger. The legislator's probably a little bit older. I think people move to Austin because there's good jobs and you can party, right? Like those are pretty much the two things that draw Austin here. I think it's got a great community. There's lots of great stuff. But if you're only here because you can make money and get drunk on 6th Street, that doesn't help the culture. That doesn't help the community. And what I really want, especially through my role with AYC and through these other organizations, is to get people, and also my podcast. So Engaging Austin, I talk to people about nonprofit and civic engagement. People need to understand that the shit that's going on in Austin outside of just like the tech and party spaces is really cool and it's really innovative. And Austin is poised to be at like up here with some of the most progressive cities in the world, like Minneapolis and Seattle, Indianapolis, which I hate to add to that list because I'm from there, but they're still doing cool shit. There are cities in the world that are doing incredible
I don't want to
things.
go back home.
No, hard pass. But like,
sorry,
Houston.
Like,
public transportation, racial justice, like minimum wage stuff, labor stuff, like that kind of thing. Like Austin is poised to be able to do that if people get engaged when they move here. Because I think when they move here and you realize that you can buy real estate with your fancy new tech job, and you're driving in and you've got all this traffic and you've got like all this stuff, you have this great opportunity to make money and have this incredible quality of life. Why not invest in the city through advocacy and through supporting these measures that will grow the city and make it an equitable place to live? Because then boom, it just keeps feeding on itself. So, and the thing is that if you live here for 10 years, like I've lived here for 11 years, right? If there were more people who are advocating for some of the more future focused policies 10 years ago, we would have light rail, we would have better transportation, we would have better bus routes, we would have these things that we only just passed last year with our bonds, right? Like these are things that are really, in fact, 30 years behind schedule because Austin keeps exploding in growth, and the older keep Austin weird, long live the Armadillo headquarters kind of people, which God love them. They didn't want Austin to grow, but they had their heads buried in the sand about what reality was. So you can't, by stopping expansion of 35, all you did was make 35 this horrible gridlock that it is through downtown. And I'm serious, right? I mean, the reason that 35 is not expanded is because like the city councils in Austin for the past 50, 40, 30 years refused to allow there to be transportation bonds to help, contribute to the expansion through TxDOT. So we think about all of these things, and now everybody wants to talk about the total explosive growth in downtown. And some people are happy about it. Some people are sad about it. Some people are like middle of the road. And this is a natural progression of what Austin had to offer. So what we need to do is bring the people who are coming into the city because of the economic opportunities, bring them to the table legislatively and politically, and get them on board with making sure that this is a better place for the people who come behind us 10 years from now. Yeah.
Thinking more long-term focus. It's not about yourself. It's about the people around you.
Yeah, absolutely. Because Austin is only going to continue to grow. And I don't know, YJ, how long have you been here?
Almost 3 years.
Okay. And you moved from
Houston. Got a new tech job, bought real estate. and my friends are like, YJ, have you been to the parks? Maybe.
But I think the thing is that there's nothing inherently wrong with moving to Austin and buying real estate and wanting to be a part of this and wanting to enrich your own quality of life. That's like
But
the
to your
first
point,
thing.
it's there is more to Austin than, hey, your tech job. And I think, why I appreciate you and what I love that I had this relationship with you is that you're teaching me a lot of things about, hey, what's going on, not only what's going on, what are the people that are doing in Austin that's making Austin a better place.
Yeah.
And I'm so inspired. I have a few friends who I never thought I'd be friends with. One of her, and I think I introduced you to her once. My friend Maddie, who led one of the women marches, rushed to the Capitol, got stopped by the Proud Boys, and I started learning about all these different groups. I'm like, what's going on? Like, why are you guys so against this? It's so dumb.
Yeah.
It's so unfortunate. You're right. I think if more people learn about what's happening in the culture, have you ever thought about running for city council? Am I going to see Kelsey 24?
2024. Yeah. So mark it now. So I live in District 10 and my city council member is Allison Alter. And she just won her reelection campaign bid. And so this is her second term and she'll be up in 2024. And my intention is to run for city council.
Did you talk to her before and I'm taking your job?
I won't be taking her job because she won't be running for reelection. But I am very good friends with actually the woman who, or not very good, I am acquaintances with the woman who ran against her, but she and her are now like, they're fine. So yeah, no, my goal is to run for office. I thinking about city council and what it's going to look like 4 years from now is anyone's guess. But I think that my District 10 is a pretty good place. I like it. I've historically lived in District 1, which is the east side. I don't think that my voice is the best voice to be on the east side because it is historically Black and Hispanic. And also Natasha Harper Madison is the city council member there. And she is just like the Beyonce of Austin, in my opinion. So there's absolutely no reason for me to run against her, or as far as I'm concerned, anybody. But representing Rosedale, Allendale, this central Texas, north of the university area, I think that I want to make sure that the city council represents Austin. And yes, Austin is very white and honestly still one of the most segregated cities in the country for a number of reasons, which we can go into at a later date. But I would like to be of service to my city in that way. I'm applying for a commission this year. I think that one of the easiest ways to get involved in Austin is through joining a city or council board or commission. And I don't want to say they're super easy to join, but they are definitely open to anybody. But yeah, running for office is on the docket.
So you're applying for a council position. Is it like something that we have to vote for? Or is it someone we can bribe? Or they'll just accept?
So the boards and the commissions are open to any Austin resident so that's the thing. Like, that's what I love most about Austin is that having accessibility to local politics is so easy. There's no barrier to entry. And sorry, my dog is drinking water behind me, so there's this horrible noise. But there's no barrier to entry to local politics. Anybody can go. It used to be, right, that on every other Thursday was the city council session, their working session, and so anybody could go and testify. I think it's all on Zoom now. I'm not quite sure what the requirements are, but you can go to the gym and run into Greg Kassar. Like, I know Natasha Harper Madison because like I asked a couple of people if I could have her email, and then boom, she and I are like Facebook friends. So there's
official.
Yeah, official, right? No longer being on Facebook. I don't know what she's up to.
Oh, that's true.
But she does follow me on Instagram, so
we're no longer friends. See how many friends have you lost because you left Facebook?
I don't know. I had a lot of friends on Facebook, and I love them, and they know where to find me if they need me. So I'm not trying to hit that like dopamine center every time somebody likes something anymore.
Which is good. You're probably more productive for it.
Oh, it's true. It's true. Yeah. I definitely scroll on Instagram, but it's for a different reason than the doom scrolling on Facebook. So no, but what I was saying is that like the boundary between the regular Austin citizen and the people who set the policies and the regulations for the city is very thin. And if you can go online and just Google like Austin boards and commissions, and then it'll come up with there's 56, I think, boards and commissions just in the city of Austin. That's not counting Travis County, which has more. And you can just go through, there's like the Arts Commission, there's the Women's Commission, there's like the Construction Commission, there's all these different things that you can get involved in. And to my understanding, every council member plus the mayor, so we're the 10 plus 1, right? So 11 effectively seats on each commission. there is each one of the council members plus the mayor has the ability to appoint someone to a board or commission. But really, from my understanding, after having waited too long this last cycle to apply for a position that got filled before I applied, everyone's like, just apply. And if you want to reach out to your council member, do. But like the dirty little secret is that there are not a lot of people clamoring to be on a board or a commission in Austin. You know what I mean? But these are the boards and commissions that inform the information that come to the council and help them set policy. So
like local government.
It is in fact
making
yeah, it is. I mean, it is. Yeah, I was going to say this little d democracy, like in a big way. A lot of people think that whatever is said on the agenda, the people who come and speak to them in testimony is going to sway them, which it has a lot to do with it. But in fact, it's the boards and the commissions that do the due diligence on the topics that come to them. That is really like the heavy lift. So
I think one of the things that I love to leave the note on, I remember one of my professors, I joined student government at this university called UT Tyler before I went to U of H. And there's one professor who I'm friends with on Facebook. It's official. But his name is Robert Sturkin, and he would always talk about what I love about him is he's always encouraging. It was like, one, you have a voice. Everyone has a voice. Everyone has a chance and opportunity to make an impact. It's not that hard. You can get people, your goals introduce you to your friends. You can make an impact. And I remember whenever I felt discouraged when I was in student government at that university, it's like, YJ, when administrators are challenging you, that's when you know you're in the right place.
It took me a really long time to realize that being challenged by people in authority was a good thing. I think that I didn't understand the power that my own singular voice could have for a really long time. Sometimes I still don't think it, but we get so immune to our own thoughts of innovation that and this is the thing that I think, especially in nonprofits, that we come up against, and I'm sure and also in entrepreneurial endeavors and startups and stuff, it's you're creating something out of nothing. And so anything that you do beyond that first point of origin is completely unknown. And so all the KPIs you set, all the deadlines you set, all of the things that you do, you're just fucking making up, right? It's the same thing with economics. It's the same thing with stock. You're just making shit up. But it's a collective belief that this is important and this matters that gives it the weight. And if you believe in something, you might be making it up as you go, but your belief gives it reality.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. I really enjoyed you. Finish my Taiwanese beer. YJ. How can people get in touch with you? You got a great podcast. I'll definitely put it on the description.
Yep.
And I'll put some of the communities you reference, and I'll ping you as well if there's others that you want me to add.
Yeah, my website is hitchinghamgroup.com. My website is engagingaustinpodcast.com. I'm on Twitter at hitch_group. And yeah, don't follow me on Instagram because all I do is post really angry political rants. But if you want to, it's hitch_please. Just send me a reply.
All right, thanks. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Yeah, thanks, YJ.
And we'll do it again when you're running for council, and hopefully it doesn't backfire.
This is not gonna backfire. I'm gonna just run on my personality.
Hopefully no one tells whoever I work for I'm doing this. But Kelsey, it's a pleasure meeting you. You have a great night, and I'll talk to you later.
Thanks, YJ.